She was humiliated the moment she handed over her ID at the base gate. A young lieutenant laughed and said, "You call this a military ID? What did you do? Tape it together?" The young soldiers mocked her in whispers, pretending to be James Bond, ready to take her badge away. But then the scanner denied access, triggered a red alarm, and displayed a forgotten symbol, a serpent coiled around a compass that had been deleted from the system 7 years ago. And when that symbol flashed, when the system spoke the words Phantom 03, everyone fell silent. Sarah Lee stood at the checkpoint of Greystone Military Base, her golden blonde hair catching the morning sun as it spilled from a loose ponytail. Her white t-shirt was tucked into simple jeans, and her olive jacket hung loosely from her shoulders, the cuffs worn from years of use. She carried an old leather pouch, its edges softened from constant handling. Lieutenant Dillon, a thin man with a cocky grin, held up her eye like it was a prop in a comedy show. "Cheap fake," he announced to the gathering crowd. "Who makes IDs this old and torn?" A young soldier chimed in. "What do you think you are, James Bond?" The men at the checkpoint burst into laughter. Sarah didn't even blink. Her hands remained steady, her eyes calm as if she'd heard worse. She tilted her head slightly and said, "Go ahead, scan it." Dillon smirked, spinning the ID between his fingers like a playing card. He slid it through the scanner, expecting a quick rejection. The machine hummed, then froze. A red light flickered, followed by a high, unusually sharp tone that cut through the morning chatter. Code zeros and triggered ghost clearance flashed on the screen. The serpent and compass symbol glowed almost alive, its edges sharp against the dull monitor. Dillon's smirk slipped. He tapped the screen, then scanned again. Same tone, same symbol. The soldiers behind him went quiet, their coffee cups hovering mid-air. "This isn't in the database," Dillon muttered, his voice cracking. Sarah stood there, hands in her pockets, her face unreadable. The checkpoint felt smaller now, the air heavy with something nobody could name. Captain Heller pushed through the crowd, a tall guy with a buzz cut and a voice that sounded like he practiced shouting in the mirror. "What's the holdup?" he snapped, snatching the ID from Dillon's hand. "Anyone with ghost clearance wouldn't be applying for basic access," he said, his tone thick with disdain. He looked Sarah up and down, her plain clothes, her scuffed sneakers. "Let me guess, watched one too many spy movies?" The soldiers laughed again, louder. A private in the back called out, "Real operatives don't walk in here like this. Total fake." Dillon stepped closer, ready to confiscate the card. Sarah's eyes flicked to him, then back to Healer. She didn't speak, but her silence wasn't weak. It was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Dillon reached for the ID, but Sarah moved first. Not fast, not showy, just smooth. She took the card from Healer's hand, her fingers brushing his for a split second. She pressed her thumb to the serpent emblem, and a faint blue light pulsed from it. The scanner beeped louder now. "Retinal lock access pending," it announced. In the control room, red lights flickered on. A mechanical voice echoed, "Subject Velvet Phantom operative confirmed." The laughter died. Soldiers exchanged glances, their boots shifting on the concrete. Healer's jaw tightened. Sarah slipped the ID back into her pouch, her movements slow, deliberate. Lieutenant Colonel Randall stormed in, his boots hitting the ground like he meant to crack it. "What's going on here?" he roared. Randall's eyes landed on Sarah, then the ID scanner. "I'm not processing that piece of junk," he said, slamming his hand down so hard the scanner rattled. "Detain her." The soldiers nodded, some smirking again, ready to drag her out. Sarah stood her ground, her voice low. "I expected more intelligence from this base." The words landed like a slap. Randall's face twitched. Then the system took over. A voice blared from every screen. "Override activated. Subject 03 authorized." The base doors clicked, unlocking in unison. Monitors flashed. "Welcome, Phantom 03. Dillon let go of Sarah's arm like it was electrified. Randall froze, his hand still raised. The soldiers stared, their smirks gone, replaced by fear. Sarah adjusted her jacket, the motion small but deliberate. Randall's voice cracked. "You're one of the final 3, he said, barely above a whisper. 3 rookie soldiers lingered near the back, whispering. "It's probably a hoax," one said. "They say the Phantom unit vanished. Nobody came back." Another nodded. "Maybe she's just propaganda, a morale stunt." Sarah paused, her hand resting on her pouch. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto theirs. "If I didn't survive," she said, her voice calm, "then who exactly is standing in front of you?" The rookies froze, their faces paling. Boots echoed down the corridor. General Charles Graham stepped into view, his 3 stars catching the fluorescent light. He removed his cap, holding it against his chest, and nodded at Sarah. "Phantom 03, he said, his voice steady but soft. "The last time we received your signal was near the frozen border. If it weren't for you, Zone Z9 would have been wiped from the map." He turned to the room. "She's not just an agent. She's the reason any of you are still standing here." The soldiers didn't move. Dylan's hands shook. Randall looked away. Graham stepped closer. "We thought you were gone, Agent Lee. 7 years, no signal, no trace." Sarah's eyes flicked to him, then drifted to a photo pinned to the wall. A group of soldiers, one face circled in red. "You carried them all." "Every single one," Graham said softly. The room stayed quiet. Sarah didn't look at the soldiers who'd laughed earlier. She adjusted her jacket again and started walking toward the inner gate. The soldiers parted without a word. As Sarah moved toward the gate, Communications Officer Sergeant Lyle leaned out from the control booth, his voice sharp with mockery. "Hey, clerk girl, you forgot to sign in. Or do you think your little magic badge gets you out of paperwork?" The soldiers nearby chuckled. Lyle stepped closer. "Look at her. Thinks she's too good for protocol. Go back to your desk job, sweetheart." He tossed the clipboard onto the desk, letting it clatter. Sarah paused, her hand resting on the gate's handle. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting Lyle's. "You'll need more than a clipboard to understand this." The words were soft, but they cut, and Lyle's smirk faltered. Inside the base, Sarah moved through stark hallways, white walls, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. She stopped at a door marked Records, her hand resting on the handle. For a moment, she stood there, her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to a sound nobody else could hear. Then she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The records room was a maze of file cabinets and computers, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. A woman sat at the desk, her glasses low on her nose. "You the new clerk?" she asked, barely looking up. Sarah nodded, setting her pouch on the counter. The woman, Mara, her name tag read, pointed to a towering stack of files. "Start there. Don't mess it up." Sarah worked steadily, sorting files, her movements precise. Every now and then, she'd pause, her eyes lingering on a name, a date, a faded photograph. One file had a picture of a young man, his face serious, a faint scar above his eye. Sarah's hand stopped, her fingers hovering over the photo. Then she closed the file and moved on. As Sarah worked, maintenance worker Jenkins poked his head into the room. "Heard about the gate," he said, his voice teasing. "You really think you can fool a base like this with that old pouch? Looks like something my kid made in shop class." He chuckled. "Bet you're just here to stir up trouble. You're no operative." She didn't look at Jenkins. She slid a file into place and said, "Sweep the floor, Jenkins. It's what you're here for." The room went quiet. Outside, the base was alive with rumors. In the mess hall, soldiers leaned over their trays, trading stories about the Phantom unit. "Heard she took out a whole squad single-handed," one said. Another shook his head. "Probably just a tech. Some glitch in the system." Back at the checkpoint, Dylan stared at the scanner like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Randall had written him up before storming off. Heller was quieter now, his usual bravado replaced by nervous energy. By noon, the base was buzzing with questions. Who was she? Why was she here? Nobody had answers, but the air felt different now, like a storm was coming. Sarah kept working, her face calm, but there was a moment when she stopped. Mara had stepped out, leaving Sarah alone. She pulled a file from the bottom of the stack, one marked Decommissioned Velvet Phantom in faded red ink. She opened it, a roster of names and dates, most stamped KIA. Her eyes landed on one name, circled in red, the same face from the photo on the checkpoint wall. She closed the file, her breath catching, then slid it back into place. As Sarah worked, a radio on Mara's desk crackled. "All personnel, stand by for priority alert. Operative 03 has been verified. Any obstruction will result in immediate disciplinary action. Phantom 03 is to be escorted to secure briefing at 1400 hours. Mara froze, her eyes darting to Sarah. The clerks exchanged glances, the air heavy with realization. Sarah didn't look up. She kept sorting files, but her jaw tightened slightly. Mara set her mug down, her hands trembling. You, you're really her. Sarah didn't answer, just slid another file into place, her silence louder than any response. The base kept moving, but the energy was different now. Soldiers who'd laughed at Sarah that morning now avoided the records room. Dylan was reassigned to a desk job by mid-afternoon. Healer's name started trending online, a grainy video of him mocking Sarah spreading across social media. Randall was called to a meeting with Graham. His office was cleared out by evening. Sarah worked through the afternoon, her hands steady. But there was a moment when she stopped. She was alone again, the records room quiet. She pulled a small photo from her pouch, older, its edges soft from handling. It showed a group of operatives standing in front of a helicopter. One face was circled, the same scar above the eye. Sarah's thumb brushed over it, her eyes softening, then hardening again. She slipped the photo back into her pouch. The door opened, and a man stepped in, tall, quiet, his face shadowed by a cap. He didn't speak, but the room changed when he entered. Sarah didn't turn around, but her shoulders relaxed like she'd been waiting for him. He walked over, standing beside her. "You didn't have to come here," he said, his voice low. Sarah didn't look at him. She just kept sorting files. "I did." He nodded, like he'd known she'd say that. Sarah left the records room that night, her pouch tucked under her arm. She walked through the base, her steps even. Soldiers watched her pass, their eyes wide, their voices silent. She reached the gate, the same one where they'd laughed at her that morning. The scanner beeped as she passed, the serpent symbol flashing one last time, bright against the dusk. She stepped outside, the man walking beside her, their shadows long against the ground. She had been judged her entire life by people who saw her simple clothes, quiet voice, and thought they knew her worth. She carried that burden not because she had to, but because she chose to. She had walked through their laughter, their dismissal, and emerged intact. Not because she fought, not because she shouted, but because she was Sarah Lee. And that was enough. You felt it, didn't you? That moment when the world looked at you and saw less than you were. You stood there quietly, not because you were weak, but because you knew. You knew your truth, even if they didn't. You weren't alone then. You're not alone now.